Adjacent to known reality lies an infinite abyss of liminal spaces and monstrous beings, the Backrooms. As with all unusual and supernatural phenomena, the SCP Foundation was set on cataloging the Backrooms as an anomaly and finding a way to contain it. But unfortunately, all it took was one failed experiment for the opposite to occur. A huge portion of Site-19 has begun no-clipping into the yellow-walled maze of the Backroom's first level, taking the research team, some D-Class, and a handful of Mobile Task Force agents into the disturbing alternate reality with it. But this isn't the most terrifying part. Just before the experiment went wrong, SCP-096, aka the Shy Guy, was transported to the testing area of Site-19 to be used as a means of clearing Backrooms entities from the path of the research team. In the midst of the chaos that ensued while dimensions fused, 096 was exposed to the gaze of a shadowy being known as a Smiler and was able to instantly break free of containment. Sprinting through the maze towards the Smiler, SCP-096 was quickly too far away for the Foundation staff to attempt recapture. Moreover, this situation demanded a far more immediate concern. There was no apparent way to no-clip the lost portions of the site back to native reality. The researchers, D-Class, and MTF personnel who were now on the other side would have to adapt and fend for themselves in this new reality. Agent Cullen, the highest-ranking member of the Mobile Task Force present, identified several hostile entities approaching. These bundles of arms were known as clumps, and since they did not possess eyes, they had evaded 096's wrathful response to entities that saw its face. On Cullen's orders, the researchers and D-Class took cover behind the agents, who opened fire on the clumps. Meanwhile, SCP-096 caught up to the Smiler that had glimpsed its face. In most cases, Smilers are highly dangerous entities that prey on humans who are trapped in the Backrooms by pulling them into the shadows. Because this was its nature, the Smiler was not prepared for 096 to not only approach at top speed, but to deliver a slamming arm thrust straight into the creature's face. The Smiler instantly knew that one more blow like that would be the destruction of its strange, monstrous existence. But it was too late to get away, and 096 certainly didn't stop at one. After beating the Smiler to a pulp, SCP-096 briefly returned to a more neutral state of being. It was not at all fazed by the new surroundings. In fact, it was temporarily relieved by the solitude of the Backrooms maze. That was when SCP-096 felt the gaze of something unknowably powerful staring at it from deeper within the Backrooms dimensions. SCP-096 was no stranger to being remotely viewed and becoming enraged by it, but this was different. These eyes were everywhere and nowhere all at once. SCP-096 felt like it was being torn apart by its own violent impulse to destroy whatever entity was currently seeing its face. With no clear target present, SCP-096 dropped to all fours, and in an instant, it ran like a mad beast through every conceivable corridor of the infinite yellow maze in less than a single second. During this blindingly fast rampage, 096 found itself back near the Foundation personnel for a fraction of a moment. None of the humans present could perceive the Shy Guy at the hypersonic speed it was going, but the result of it passing by was evident in the abrupt death of several MTF agents who were still focused on fending off the clumps. It was collateral damage to 096, who didn't intend for its speeding body to collide with the agents, but in any case, the clumps were at that much more of an advantage when it came to brutally attacking the members of the research team. The clumps' numbers were increasing as well, as more of the fleshy aberrations rolled forth from the woodwork. One of the D-Class, D-3461, panicked, breaking away from the defensive line and bludgeoning an MTF agent from behind. The others were still reeling from the sudden slaughter created by SCP-096 and were not quick enough to stop D-3461 from turning tail and running off into the maze with a stolen Mobile Task Force issue firearm. The clumps seemed to ignore this and focused on the larger group of humans present, closing in, well, a clump of clumps. Senior researcher Dr. Hart, an expert in reading the body language of anomalous creatures, noticed this idiosyncratic movement immediately. She immediately notified the rest of the research team that the clumps seemed to prioritize going after humans in groups. As much as it was a cliché in horror and adventure media, it seemed like the best course of action was to split into groups of 2 or 3 and run in all directions. Without momentum, the clumps weren't especially fast, and given the sharp turns and numerous crisscrossing pathways of the backroom's first level, the humans could, with a head start, keep themselves at a safe distance if they used their brains and less cumbersome limbs to maximum efficiency. Dr. Hart chose her most trusted scientific understudy, Dr. Whitaker, as her retreat buddy, and the two began to hurry down the many hallways away from the clumps. If there was a way to survive these entities, even on their home terrain, it would be through the superior intellect of the researchers. That is what Dr. Hart believed in her doctor's heart. She and the others who followed her plan were lucky that 096 had stopped zooming through the maze of the backrooms' first level. This was because it realized that the entity, or entities, which were looking at it were not here in this dimension, or rather, this level of the backrooms. But that didn't mean that whatever it was could hide for long, especially not from SCP-096. The Shy Guy was capable of many things when provoked by another being seeing its face, and among the most obvious was its nigh invulnerability and extreme speed. Both of these factors would come into play as SCP-096 attempted a bizarre and fascinating feat. The Shy Guy's entire body shivered, vibrating in place at an even faster velocity than it had used to cross the infinite maze in an instant moments prior. This unorthodox psychic straining movement pattern made SCP-096 especially prone to no-clipping, which was the only reliable way to navigate between levels of the backrooms. The sustained vibration was highly damaging to 096's body, but it felt no pain, and the broken bones and frayed muscles were returned to normal instantaneously. Furiously, and with no further preparation, SCP-096 no-clipped through the floor of the maze and began to descend through the known levels of the backrooms towards the offending entity that was still looking at its face. Down 1 level, then 2, then 3. The pressure of maintaining this feat would more than likely kill or incapacitate any other being, including many of SCP-096's fellow powerful anomalies. But that level of endurance was what made SCP-096 so distinct and so unstoppable. 4 levels down, 5 levels down. As SCP-096 continued to descend, the scattered personnel from the Foundation were making their own discoveries about no-clipping through the backrooms. D-3461 had found himself in a strange new level of the backrooms filled with sewer pipes and swooping death moths. The rifle he had taken with him would prove to be ample protection for now, but he knew his ammunition wouldn't be there forever. Still, taking his chances sneaking around down here felt better than trying to go back towards anyone who knew him from the Foundation. Like most D-Class, D-3461, formerly known as Gene Beatty, was a hardened criminal through and through, and he had done unforgivable things prior to his time contained by the SCP Foundation. He didn't want to go back, not to the Foundation, not to prison, and not even to the real world. Forget them all, he thought. He would survive in this hellish abyss known as the Backrooms with only his malice and sense of self-preservation to guide him. Agent Cullen, on the other hand, who was accompanied by 2 of his surviving Mobile Task Force subordinates, was focused on patrolling the Yellow Maze and searching for potential human survivors. If other people had been no-clipping into the backrooms for as long as the Foundation's data suggested, it was possible that enough of those unfortunates were able to carve out a life for themselves, that a sizable faction had formed over the years. Such a group would always have a need for armed assistance and well-trained soldiers, so Cullen knew he could easily find himself a place among them. From there, he would do everything in his power to muster resources, track down the scattered Foundation personnel, and ultimately return home. They have to be around here somewhere, he told himself and his agents. Of all the now hopelessly lost researchers, it seemed that Dr. Hart and Dr. Whitaker had made it the farthest into the backrooms. They were both now wandering in the Infinite Hotel, otherwise known as Level 5, a sprawling labyrinth of suites and lobbies that would rival the finest establishments in the front rooms of reality. That is, if it were not also full of the same kind of hostile entities that were so common through the backrooms. Dr. Whitaker attempted to stay in high spirits, however making a sophomoric joke about needing a vacation from his vacation. Dr. Hart groaned, but on some level she was grateful to have her younger and more eccentric colleague close by. Though he lacked common sense, he was a prodigy at science, and more than that, he was loyal. The two of them would need teamwork and perseverance to keep going in this place, and through her mentorship of the young man, the groundwork was already there. He and I will manage somehow, Dr. Hart affirmed in her mind. Elsewhere, several levels down, SCP-096 had arrived at the source of the strange gaze that had been fixed upon it. In Level 11 of the Backrooms, the city, which fittingly enough resembled a modern human city of vast proportions, SCP-096 was found locked onto the entity known as Argos, Entity 74, an ancient eyeless humanoid whose vision was pervasive and near omniscient throughout the Backrooms. The cruel and judgmental being could observe the sins of any sentient creature that entered the Backrooms and would carry out a brutal punishment accordingly. This was its routine behavior, and it didn't single out SCP-096 any more than it did D-3461, whose sins were much more severe in the eyes of Argos due to the ill intent behind them. That is not to say that Argos saw the Shy Guy as innocent. Even out of perceived defense, the amount of lives that SCP-096 had taken was, on principle, enough to call even the most well-meaning being a sinner. A fight between Argos and the Shy Guy was inevitable. Argos was accompanied by several scores of spear-wielding warriors in tactical gear, human explorers who had joined his cause. They would prove to be little more than speed bumps, as SCP-096 made skid marks out of them on its way to pummel the ever-loving snot out of Argos. But Argos was not going to allow the sacrifices of his eyes to be in vain. The entity used the reach of his spear to strike 096 at a distance, impaling the creature in mid-run to the ground. This held the Shy Guy for all but a moment before it moved its body up the spear and slammed into Argos, throwing the two of them through a nearby building. Argos fought desperately to remove his spear from his opponent's body, as all the while 096 pounded him with punches that could each reduce an automobile to scrap metal. The two interlocked monsters tumbled through wall after wall of the skyscraper, taking the lives of several unlucky human citizens in the process. When Argos pried his spear free from 096, he immediately jumped back several paces, but once again, he had underestimated the Shy Guy, who was at his throat in seconds. Passers-by on the street watched in horror as 096 hurled Argos by the throat into the skyscraper, directly across from the one they had been fighting in. Argos crashed through the glass of one of the windows and into an office floor. One titanic leap from the Shy Guy later, and 096 had joined Argos on this new fighting stage. Argos twirled his spear in a frenzied display of combat prowess. If this thing insisted on advancing towards him with no regard for its well-being, it would have to go through his spear multiple times over. But 096 was not the kind to let fear stop it from advancing. It charged, taking every attack Argos could dish out before pummeling him downward through several floors of the building until they reached the ground level. SCP-096 could have taken far more punishment, but Argos had reached his limit. The entity spear fell from his hand as 096 continued to hit harder and harder, over and over again, until Argos was close to death, as an immortal Backrooms entity could be. At the very least, he had been injured so severely that his all-seeing gaze had become weakened. For the Shy Guy, this meant that Argos was technically no longer looking at it. It became docile once more and wandered out of the building into the streets. To its relief and to the relief of the nearby entities, the facelings of the city had no eyes and no interest in looking at 096, preferring to continue their mindless pantomime of normative life. Aren't we all, in a cosmic sense? Regardless, SCP-096 walked through the streets of the city with one goal: return home. But home was far, far away from where the Shy Guy was, and the no-clipping maneuver that it performed earlier was not something that the anomaly could muster the recklessness to do at all times. Only when its face was glimpsed did SCP-096 possess its murderous determination. At the moment, SCP-096 was like a morning jogger, traveling through level 11 at a brisk pace and searching for a way out. This naturally led the anomaly towards the suburban neighborhoods, which were themselves an entrance to the Backrooms Level 9, Suburbia. It was here on the dark streets of the limitless suburbs that 096 encountered a new nightmare: the Neighborhood Watch. Comprised of a series of hostile entities resembling, in part, human eyeballs, these ocular adversaries were known to patrol Suburbia and keep the peace by eliminating all intruders, of course. The floating watchers were capable of shooting disintegration beams, while the towering striders possessed sinewy limbs that could easily bash most entities into submission. But, unfortunately for everyone involved, they were giant eyeballs. One look from the Neighborhood Watch in the direction of SCP-096, and their fates were sealed. Being ogled by humongous eyeballs was simply more than the Shy Guy could take. With a primal screech, it ran towards the oversized peepers with a massacre on its mind. A few of the Watchers had time to fire disintegration blasts, which slowed the approach of SCP-096, but it was too little, too late. SCP-096 smashed into the Strider, knocking it to the ground and delivering a crushing blow to its pupil. Without missing a beat, SCP-096 leaped into the air and smashed one of the Watchers against a charming suburban home. The Shy Guy rampage would continue until there were no more eyes on it, in the Backrooms or anywhere. Now check out SCP-096 vs. SCP-343 and SCP-096's sad end for more.